Arc 10, Chapter 11. The reason the dragon gem shines, stranger. Don't you think that Sakura and Tiga are just heartless? If I'd known things would turn out like this, even eyes. Stranger. Have you ever thought of saving someone with the sacrament out of self-preservation before? Stranger. I probably would have done it anyway, but the way I'd feel about it would be completely different depending on whether I knew or not. Wailing with teary eyes, Phylor glared at Sakura, who sat directly in front of her, and she apparently seemed earnestly aware of her own impulsivity, having completed some proper self-analysis. Sakura, who had styled herself as a stand-in for her older sister, frowning at that outburst of Phylor's. Sakura, even if you put it like that, the ones inconvenienced would be us all the same. Subaru-chan, Beatrice-chan, you two understand me, right? Subaru. I don't get why you're dragging me and Biko into this, but I more or less get that the situation was inevitable. Beatrice. Regardless of where responsibility lies, one can imagine from your exchange that Phylor was the one who created such an impetus, I suppose. Saying so, Subaru and Beatrice shook their heads incredulously in perfect sync, expressing their opinions on the query from Sakura, who was sitting right beside them. Incidentally, the seating arrangement on the sofas, which faced each other in the parlor, was currently Emilia and Otto on the host side, with Phylor clinging onto Emilia's arm, and Sakura on the guest side, along with Subaru and Beatrice sitting side by side, having changed seats. In addition to Petra, who had stood by the wall since the beginning, Rem, who had shown Phylor in, joined her, adding to the ever-growing liveliness of the parlor. Subaru. That said, the source of the increase in volume is mostly Phylor's fault anyway. To begin with, why are we even sitting on this side? It's a strange pairing. Phylor, my goodness. Emilia, did you hear that? That Subaru, he's trying to tear apart two incomparable friends, myself and Emilia. Don't tell me, are you a spy for the church? Beatrice, no matter how you look at it, the only one who is a spy for the church is you, in fact. Beatrice gave a sigh of lament at Phylor, who wore a countenance as if to say she was filled with dread. Emilia, whose arm was still clutched in Phylor's grip, patted her friend's head despite her wry smile. Emilia. Geez, don't look at Subaru like that, Phylor. Subaru is really sweet, and he'd never come between us. To begin with, my relationship with Subaru is completely different from my relationship with you, okay? Phylor. Oh, of course, I agree. By the way, which one is more important to you? Emilia. Well. Phylor, actually, it's fine. Don't say it. This too is in the scriptures. The dragon bestows ordeals upon us out of love. Just as gold scorched by flames shall gain further purity, so too shall the soul, through adversity born of that love, emanate a brilliance worthy of the dragon's will. With her head bowed and clinging to her scriptures, Phylor no longer seemed like a devout adherent of the Church of the Divine Dragon, but rather was simply covering up that which was inconvenient with the doctrines of the scriptures. Due to her having cut Emilia off, Subaru's chance to hear where he stood in Emilia's heart from her own mouth was snatched away, leaving him feeling unsettled. That aside, Emilia, about what we were talking about earlier, you said Phylor will be participating in the royal selection, so is she taking Priscilla's place after all? Ignoring Phylor, whose face was now cycling between red and blue all by itself, Emilia's question was aimed at Sakura, sitting across from her. Sakura's drowsy, drooping eyes narrowing slightly. Sakura. At the very least, there's no doubt Priscilla-chan's death is part of the Ryosen. Otherwise, it would contradict the account of the dragon history stone. Otto. After all, there are to be 5 dragon priestesses, those who qualify as royal candidates as recorded upon the dragon history stone. According to the policy of the Church of the Divine Dragon, you cannot go against that, can you? Sakura, of course, since that premise had collapsed, we took it as our chance and brazenly strolled into the castle. Please don't think of it as something like that. Even if, by chance, Priscilla-chan's absence allows a vacancy for the position of dragon priestess, the church's policy is to maintain our distance. Otto. However, that did not occur. The reason for that is, Otto deliberately left his conclusion unspoken, but the gazes of everyone present gathered upon Phylor, who had given rise to the first ripple that had led to this situation. Her throat tightened at the discomfort of having those eyes upon her. and then, clinging to Emilia. Phylor, that's wrong, Emilia. I never had even the slightest intention of becoming your enemy. It was just a stroke of bad luck. FFF for the most part. As her face turned pale, Phylor's eyes snapping wide as she whipped around to glare at Sakura, Phylor. For the most part, I would complain that the church's predisposition to covering things up is suspicious. All of this, it was wrong to have raised me so sheltered until now. I mean, it's not that I didn't think it was easy peasy being exempt from the studies the other children had to take, but to think that it would tear me and Emilia apart, it's not my fault. Emilia, there, don't cry, Phylor. I'm not angry at all, and I've never thought of the other royal candidates as my enemies. Phylor, Emilia, hic. The way Emilia gently stroked her head soothed Phylor's unruly heart. Seeing this exchange, Sakura let out an oh my and brought her hand to her mouth with an astonished face. Sakura. Usually she'd be rambling on and on from here, but Emilia-chan, you're so good at dealing with Phylor-chan, is there some kind of trick to it, or something? Subaru. Putting aside the quips about every Phylor being rendered powerless before Emilia-tan's tender tolerance, ultimately, what exactly is Phylor doing here? Based on her behavior so far, he knew this was not a proclamation of war against the royal selection. He thought there was no way she had seriously run through the royal capital, just to whine and make excuses. Beatrice, really, I suppose. It would hardly be a surprise if that were the case, in fact. Subaru, I'm with you there, but since that won't advance the conversation. Phylor, wait just a minute. Do you think I am that witless? Certainly, I often act without thinking, but today is different. I have a proper strategy. Subaru, a strategy. Phylor, yes, a strategy. I don't wish to partake in the royal selection. However, I wish to use the sacrament and fulfill my duty as a saintess. Therefore, I'll have my friend Emilia shelter me and save the people of Prestella in secret. How about it? Subaru, is this an evil plan cooked up by a criminal organization from a Sunday morning cartoon? It was a plan so sloppy that even a child could poke holes in it. Since her goal was helping others, it was not even an evil plan in the first place. But the most glaring issue was that Sakura had already found out about it. Ultimately, it was a scheme where she had tripped over her own feet before even reaching the starting line. Subaru. Besides, it would look terrible if we were to do something like abducting a saintess of the Church of the Divine Dragon. Petra. Emilia Nisama has that sort of side too, but having no self-awareness about being a bomb is quite dangerous, isn't it? Phylor. Does that mean Emilia and I are a good match? Beatrice. That isn't something to be bashful about, I suppose. Where was the basis for that confidence, with Phylor's plan having been so tragically rejected? Moreover, Subaru thought Phylor was taking the whole situation a bit too lightly. For a while now, she had been trying to steer the conversation in the direction of her declining to participate in the royal selection. But, Emilia. Qualification as a royal candidate isn't something you can just abandon on a whim. Isn't that right? Subaru. Emilia-tan. Emilia. I also study hard every day. I'm sure I understand the kingdom much better than I did at the beginning, and also the binding power of what is written upon the dragon history stone. I had my reasons for wanting to participate in the royal selection, but I'm sure that even without them, I don't think I could have refused. Staring at Phylor, who was clinging onto her arm, Emilia's words spilled out earnestly. It was understandable that the royal candidates had no right to refuse. He had spoken with Garfield and Petra the night before, but the covenant with the dragon was solidly and deeply rooted within the dragon kingdom. Actually, Felt had once tried to refuse participation in the royal selection. However, she had been forced to participate in exchange for the safety of Ramjaya, who had tried to steal her away. That meant there was a certain compulsion for the kingdom to stop at nothing in order to induce the participation of the dragon priestesses described by the dragon history stone. Emilia was declaring that the same now applied to Phylor. Phylor. But, that's not what I wanted, you know. Emilia, right, I'm sure you didn't. I also think that if you hadn't been able to make the insignia shine, Phylor, then we wouldn't be having this conversation, however. The dragon gem shone, and you were selected, Phylor. I'm sure you understand the significance of that better than anyone. Phylor, As Emilia spoke to her with a tone that almost felt motherly, Phylor hung her head weakly. Phylor was a nun of the Church of the Divine Dragon. Needless to say, as one who held such faith, love, and reverence for the dragon, it put her in the position where she truly felt the binding power of the dragon history, stones, account stronger than anyone else. It could even be said that her behavior up to this point had been a childish escape from reality. However, Phylor, in that case, how about this? Emilia and I will form an alliance of friendship. And then I'll do everything in my power to help Emilia become the monarch. If we do so, then the royal selection. Emilia. Thank you, Phylor, but I would really hate that. Quietly, but with unwavering firmness, Emilia clearly made that declaration. Phylor's throat echoed delicately with a hue before the nobility of that voice like a silver bell. To make her point clear, Emilia felt around in her pocket and opened her palm to reveal the insignia she had grabbed. As soon as she did, the overflowing crimson radiance of the dragon gem shone across the parlor of the royal residence with a dazzling light. Emilia, I said so before, but I had reasons I wanted to participate in the royal selection from the very beginning. While demonstrating the brilliance of the dragon gem, Emilia spoke so that Phylor would listen. Emilia's initial motivation to join the royal selection had been to use the power of the dragon's blood kept in the royal castle to save her hometown, which had been frozen in ice. But as time went on, as she met others, and as she learned more, Emilia's sentiments regarding the royal selection were now beginning to change. However, that initial desire would neither change nor vanish. And, Emilia, it's the same for the others as well. Crush-san had her own, Anastasia-san had her own, Felt-chan had her own, and Priscilla had her own. We all have our own things we wanted to achieve, and so we all joined the royal selection. No, that's wrong. Phylor, wrong. What's wrong about it? Emilia, I'm sure that those who can make the dragon gem shine have reasons to participate in the royal selection. They all have something that they can only achieve if they are part of it. If so, what is it for you? Phylor, for me? Emilia gave Phylor, who was blinking in dumbfounded amazement, a valiant and lovely smile. She had suggested supporting her friend Emilia's desires should she become a royal candidate, but Emilia could not quite accept that was Phylor's own desire. Emilia would not recognize her inclusion into the royal selection of the kingdom of Lugunica for such a reason. Emilia, please, don't say that you don't want to as soon as it is asked of you, due to feeling overwhelmed. Think about it really carefully. I'm sure you won't be able to refuse joining the royal selection anyway. However, I don't want someone who joins just because they feel they have no choice but to take Priscilla's seat. It was a resolute statement, a wish, and also a prayer. Phylor blinked at Emilia, who had directly expressed everything within her heart. No one said a thing regarding the tensions swelling between the two of them, coming in contact with each other with zero distance between them. Neither Subaru, nor anyone else, wanted to insert their presence into the silence born between them, so as not to introduce any needless impurities into the decision to come. Phylor. Yes, it was Emilia, watching Phylor closer than anyone, who created ripples upon the surface of that silence. She narrowed her eyes, framed by her long lashes, and gave the insignia in her hand to Phylor. Phylor reflexively accepted that which was offered to her. Even if it was due to its lack of awareness, the insignia's dragon gem chose not when to shine. Phylor, if I were to participate in the royal selection. As Phylor muttered this, the dragon gem illuminated within her hand, just as it had in Emilia's. As it glistened with a light the same color as her own eyes, Phylor made a declaration. In the face of that unescapable destiny, known as the royal selection that had been thrust upon her, what sort of principles would she proclaim? Phylor, I wish to reform the relationship between the church and the state that has existed up till now, so that those within the castle and those of the church will no longer hesitate to extend a hand to the other due to some strange, stubborn formality. Emilia, Phylor, if I were to become the monarch, I would make this a country where none would hesitate to help others in need. It was nothing more than idealism that had been instilled in her, the full details of which were currently quite lacking. Yet, in Phylor's own way, She wished to break the fetters and frustrations that she had experienced growing up and living as a member of the Church of the Divine Dragon, and make the world a better place. And now that she was able to tout such principles, there were none who could laugh at Phylor, deride her as someone elevated to her high position against her own will by those around her, or call her begrudging participation in the royal selection merely a means to fill a vacancy. Otto, as I thought, I ought to have turned away all visits without an appointment. Subaru heard Otto mutter that under his breath, in response to the conclusion Phylor had reached. Dressed lightly without his hat or mantle, as he ran his fingers through his wavy, gray hair absent-mindedly, he appraised the occurrence happening there. In truth, Subaru could understand why Otto felt like saying that. Subaru. After all, a super-strong rival has made an appearance just now. Otto, I think this is a laughably self-destructive move on our part. However, the fact that it was none other than our own leader that encouraged it is what is troublesome. Subaru. Relax. The stronger the opponent, the stronger Emiliatan becomes, so something like this gives me a good feeling. Otto, if you are trying to cheer me up, could you not tell me something less objectionable than that? Beatrice. Naturally, Betty would like to feel sorry for Otto right now, in fact. However, Beatrice trailed off and narrowed her eyes, and gazing toward what shone radiantly before them, toward Emilia and Phylor, Subaru concurred with that opinion. Certainly, if one were to limit themselves to only the event that had occurred, it probably ought to have been labeled as a foolish act. An amusing image of Roswal falling to his knees upon hearing that news afterwards came to mind. Nevertheless, it was worth it. In exchange for the appearance of a super-strong rival, one thing was certain, Emilia. I absolutely will not lose to Phylor. Because without a doubt, Emilia, who aspired to be the monarch, had been able to show her true colors. Stranger, and so I respectfully accept your request for my participation in the royal selection. With one hand placed on her chest, and the other causing the insignia to shine with a sparkle, Phylor made that proclamation with majesty, with boldness, and without hesitation. This was the royal castle, but rather than the throne room where they would be summoned if something significant were to occur, it was a conference room that appeared to be used for slightly more compact discussions. In a space about the size of a school classroom, a round table capable of accommodating approximately 20 people around its circumference had been placed there. And traditionally, briefings between the Council of Wise Men and civil officials of the castle had often been held here. Emilia, on the day the royal selection started, after Subaru was kicked out of the chamber, we all moved to this conference room to discuss things. Subaru, off stage from me getting thrashed by Julius. Emilia, I still can't remember, but Subaru, you had a fight with Julius. You must have made up properly. That's why the two of you are really good friends. Subaru, setting aside whether he and I are really good friends, it was a necessary event for Emiliatan and I to become really good friends. Subaru responded to Emilia's whispered description with a crooked smile. In a world where Julius's name was yet lost, Subaru did not feel like delving deeply into how those involved recollected his disgrace upon that day, even as a form of admonishment. Fortunately, the conference room had a noticeable amount of empty seats on this occasion, and there were few people here who were involved on that day. After all, this was a so-called top-secret meeting, with only a minimum number of those involved from each camp, and for the Emilia camp, that was limited to only Emilia and Subaru, as well as his partner Beatrice. Although one of these extremely limited participants, an elderly man with a distinctive long beard who greeted them, was indeed one of the individuals involved with that day. That elderly man's Miklatov McMahon, member of the Council of Wise Men, while watching Phylor reach a rather preferable change of heart. Miklatov, HRRRMM. We are immensely grateful for that response, even though we were the ones to make such demands, but could you please inform me once more? I did give my permission, but for what reason did you have Emilia-sama and Natsuki Dono join us here? Phylor, I received advice from their council this morning before coming to the castle. Emilia is an irreplaceable friend of mine, and Subaru is her knight, to be honest. I wanted to bring along everyone from the Emilia camp who helped support me in declaring my resolve. Stranger, As you can imagine, if you were to do that, the church, as well as myself, would be in a rather awkward position. When Philor responded to Miklatov's inquiry, the sole individual to accompany her from the church, Sakura, made a troubled face whilst uttering those words. Philor seemed dissatisfied with that answer, but since it would be odd for all the members of the Emilia camp to be gathered en masse for such a ceremonious event, Sakura's view was likely the appropriate one. However, compared to the impressions left upon Subaru, Miklatov, stroking his long beard, seemed to have been struck by a different portion of what Philor had said. The wise elder's astute eyes narrowed, and as he let out his habitual sigh with a HRRRMM, Miklatov, a friend, you say. Miss Philor from the Church of the Divine Dragon and Emilia Sama. Subaru, is that it? Emilia Tan is a silver-haired half-elf, and Philor is a nun of the Church of the Divine Dragon. Is that what you are trying to get at? Emilia. Hold on, Subaru. Picking up on his muttering, Emilia chided Subaru as he instinctively began to act hastily. Still, there were no dependable comrades from their camp present outside of Subaru and Beatrice. Thus, Subaru must speak to Miklatov impactfully on everyone's behalf. As the one and only knight entrusted with Emilia, he must adamantly contend with such absurdity. Subaru, Miklatov-san, you must be aware of Emilia's achievements over the past year and a half. We all know of and have taken account of such things, and yet, I wish the higher-ups of this country would stop continuously taking such a prejudiced view of her. Speaking of her as a half-elf, is it not enough already? Miklatov, saying, is it not enough, seems to show a bit of a disregard for public sentiment. From the start, it was obvious that Emilia and the witch had nothing further in common beyond appearance and race, however. That alone is momentous. You must understand, do you not? Subaru, NGH. Using his experienced artistry when it came to rhetoric, Miklatov caused Subaru, who had been berating him rather assuredly, to waver. The problem here, once more, was the common sense rooted within the inhabitants of this world, that which would never well up from within Subaru as his own true feelings. And that was not confined to the silver-haired half-elf, Emilia. Miklatov, inevitably, the fact that you, a nun of the Church of the Divine Dragon, will become a candidate for the royal selection will surely come as a great surprise for many people. It will also be a major departure from convention. This was an exceedingly thorny decision to make. Philor, yes, I am well aware of that fact, and yet, Miklatov, HRRRMM, and yet, what is it that you wish to ask? Philor, and yet, if that is indeed the case, then just why did you go to such lengths for me to enter the royal selection? That doubt, weaved from Philor's lips, was indeed a natural question to ask. Miklatov's wording just then gave a glimpse into the state of affairs. That the royal castle, for its part, was not in any way readily accepting of a royal candidate from the Church of the Divine Dragon. Philor, I'm also a nun of the Church of the Divine Dragon, and although I naturally understand rigid adherence to the record of the Dragon History Stone, the fact remains that even with Priscilla Bariel, that even with her passing, 5 individuals with the qualifications of a dragon priestess had been gathered, and the royal selection had begun. The record shouldn't have been distorted. Beatrice, or perhaps, has the account of the Dragon History Stone been updated, I suppose? Are you saying that, when lacking 5 priestesses, a replacement priestess was found and it was rewritten as if to promote her, in fact? Miklatov, no, we have received no such report that the record of the Dragon History Stone has changed. Merely, rather than our intentions regarding this matter, it is more a question of national sentiment. Subaru, national, Emilia. Sentiment? Subaru and Emilia tilted their heads, as if question marks were floating above them regarding Miklatov's answer. And then, lowering his voice slightly, Miklatov, it shall become public knowledge in due course, but for now, this is confidential. In truth, it appears that rumors are already circulating through the streets. That Duchess Karsten was granted salvation by a saintess of the Church of the Divine Dragon. Subaru and Emilia. Miklatov, a gag order was imposed within the royal castle regarding this matter. Of course, even if you keep information locked up, it will still seep out like raindrops. However, Even rumors that the saintess in question possesses the same characteristics as the long-since vanished princess of Lugunica have spread substantially. Subaru. Isn't that basically all the information in its entirety being leaked? Miklatov's face clouded over with bitterness. But if it was indeed true, then it meant that the royal castle's attempt at information control had ended in a completely ill-prepared failure. Subaru, I think there's no way, but Phylor, were you so delighted to have saved Crushsan that, in your good mood, you spread your own achievement around? Beatrice, Betty has been convinced, I suppose. Phylor, please don't be. Also, I didn't do any such thing. Even I have common sense. Well, I may have told some people close to me, wanting to use them to persuade the people of the church. But they shouldn't have spread it around town. Subaru, Biko, Beatrice, let's say that it's gray as close to black as it can get, in fact. Subaru more or less agreed with Beatrice's scathing evaluation. He pitied Phylor, stomping her feet in vexation, but no matter how much she insisted that she had not done so, the feeling that she had indeed could not be erased. Such was the impression he had of the girl up to now. In any case, no matter whoever might have been responsible for the dissemination of such rumors. Emilia, then, perhaps there are rumors that Phylor made the insignia shine as well. And since it would be strange for Phylor to not be included as a royal candidate, everyone is peeved. Miklatov, talk has yet to go that far. However, news of Priscilla Sama's death will soon be announced to the public. If Miss Phylor's existence has become known by that time, naturally the streets will overflow with voices calling for her participation in the royal selection. Subaru. So, before that happens, you want to finish laying all the groundwork in advance, huh? If Phylor's participation was a matter of course anyway, it would keep things more transparent for everyone to quickly advance the conversation. While on one hand, he could understand such arrangements by the adults, but sure enough, he was somewhat bothered by Phylor's lack of a veto. Had she not been able to discuss this with Emilia beforehand, Phylor would have joined in the worst possible frame of mind, completely lacking the necessary mettle of a royal candidate. Sakura. Now, don't frown like that, Subaru-chan. We successfully came to a conclusion somehow or another, so that means we're fine, Riite. Subaru, is this fine with you, Sakura-san? Initially, Phylor wasn't supposed to have left the church, or rather, her participation in the royal selection was unforeseen, right? Sakura. Whether they want it or not, the leaves of the trees are nothing but at the whim of the wind and water. Subaru. As Sakura's tone of voice suddenly fell, Subaru could not help but look embarrassed. Those few words were filled with a poignant sense of emptiness, loaded with vacuous resignation, almost as if it were that of an old tree, agape with a large hollow, withering to naught. It nearly even felt like, rather than speaking about Phylor, those words were rather about Sakura herself, about her own resignation. Sakura, that which will happen will happen. To begin with, even if she has the drive to do so, she is a year and a half behind the other children, so she might not be able to compete. Phylor, excuse me, Sakura. Why do you have to put a damper on my enthusiasm like that? If I'm going to do it, I'm going to win. My tenacity is truly that of the dragons. Subaru, I've been curious. What does the Church of the Divine Dragon think of the way Phylor carelessly makes light of the dragon? Sakura, blasphemy or something along those lines. Phylor, blasphemy. It was more scathing than he had anticipated, but as expected, it seemed that they deemed it as behavior not to be endorsed. Phylor maintained a stance utterly distant from the typical image of a saintess. At any rate, with most of his questions answered, Subaru now had a general grasp on the purpose of this top-secret meeting, and the rationale behind why the participants had been so tightly restricted. That was to say, this was an informal notice, confirming the intentions and plans of the parties involved before the proper public announcement. And when he thought about it that far, suddenly, Subaru's anxiety spiked. That was Subaru. Say, Phylor, if you are also going to become a royal candidate, does that mean you will also appoint a knight like the other candidates, like Emilia-tan did with me? Emilia. Subaru, you might have a misunderstanding about that. Subaru, a misunderstanding. Emilia, it just so happens that all of us royal candidates are attended by knights. but that's not an absolute rule. After all, Anastasia-san and I didn't form a knight contract with Julius and you from the start, right? Subaru. That's true for me, but Julius was Anastasia's knight from the beginning. Emilia. Ah, that's right. I'll have to remember that properly for Julius's sake. While Emilia made a minor correction due to the influence of the missing name, Subaru, however, was convinced by that explanation. Indeed, at the outset, Roswell had accompanied Emilia as her backer, but Subaru had been absent as a knight, or rather, he had not yet won that trust. Therefore, perhaps being a royal candidate did not necessitate having a knight. Subaru, but I do think going through the hassle of finding one would bring you more prestige. What are you going to do? The only one close to Philor that could fulfill the requirements would be, maybe my friend. Emilia. My friend. That's Tiga, right? Still, that might be nice. Philor also seems to be really close with Tiga. Philor. My knight being Tiga. That doesn't feel the least bit special. Clasping her hands together in front of her chest, Emilia was in complete agreement with Subaru's nomination, and yet Philor booed that choice with incredible vigor. Philor, well, Tiga is skillful, so if appointed as a knight, he would probably do well and not make any mistakes, but he scolds me a lot and is quick to doubt me whenever something happens. So I suppose he lacks the necessary respect and loyalty for a knight. Besides, even though he's not a knight, it won't change that he still accompanies me here and there even now, so there's no point in going out of my way to name him as my knight. Rejected? I do reject it. Subaru. Well, it is your knight, so I think you should do as you like, huh? In the first place, how would one usually even go about appointing a knight? For example, in Subaru's case, he was conferred his knighthood by Emilia and was immediately installed as her knight, which was how he acquired his current position. But what of Reinhard or Julius? Receiving a knight should not have been something restricted solely to royal candidates, but Subaru only now felt shame at his own ignorance of what such contracts were like in those sorts of situations. Miklatov. HRRRMM, indeed. In many cases, it is typical for a knight to seek out a lord and swear fealty in order to be appointed. However, for a knight of great renown, it is not uncommon for some lords to promise a high salary and favorable treatment, extending an invitation to them and requesting that they serve them. Subaru, oh, I wasn't expecting Miklatov-san to explain it to me. By the way, do you employ any knights, Miklatov-san? Miklatov. There have been many who have long since come and gone that have placed their trust in our household. The prevailing view is that, as you might expect, those who have had an outstanding knight dedicate their sword to them command a certain amount of respect. Subaru. That's, well, it's understandable. Indeed, the status of having the sword saint or the finest of knights as their foremost knights ought to have attached quite a great deal of prestige to the names of Felt and Anastasia. The notoriety of the foremost knights was an important barometer for the royal selection. Sure enough, Subaru wondered if he had actually become Emilia's strength as a knight. In addition, he wondered if Crush, who had dismissed Ferris from the role of her one and only knight, might now acquire a new knight. Subaru. He did not want that. Indeed, as the individual involved would put it, thinking those thoughts as if clinging to them was a result of Subaru's pridefulness, his desire for everything to go the way he wished. They might find a different answer to the unavoidable rift that had formed between the two of them if they took some time to recollect themselves. So, until then, he prayed that she would leave that seat vacant. Yes, with prideful resolve, Subaru began feeling sentimental. Philor. Just now, Miklatov-sama said this, that for an outstanding knight to approach me, I should raise my voice and appeal earnestly. Beatrice. The passion seems to differ quite a bit from what Betty heard, I suppose. Subaru. Me too. I also felt like the nuance was a bit different, but clenching her fists tightly and stifling her emotions, Philor muttered. Beatrice's response to that pulled Subaru back from his sentimentality into reality. Perhaps having ears that only heard what was convenient for herself, Philor interpreted Miklatov's statement in her own way, and on top of that, her cheeks were becoming slightly flushed. For some reason, it seemed like something had gotten her emotions riled up to the point of making her cheeks burn. But, Emilia, maybe you already have an idea of who you want to appoint as your knight, Philor. Philor. How did you, was it because of our close friendship? Emilia, MHM, I think so. So what sort of person are they? Subaru, just to get it out of the way, Reinhard's already all sold out. Beatrice. And naturally, Subaru and Betty are under a sales contract in perpetuity to Emilia, in fact. With the attention of Subaru, Emilia, Beatrice, Sakura, and Miklatov centered upon herself, Phylor smiled with a somewhat meaningful phew-phew-phew. She met all of their gazes, vigorously opening the thick book of scriptures before her. Phylor, please have a listen. This too is in the scriptures. The arm of man doth swing the sword, but it be the dragon's will that deals in life. Under the footprints of a knight chosen, even the most bloodied of ruts turn to roads of silver. Emilia. That means. Phylor. Basically, the one most suitable to be my knight is someone who has been recognized by the dragon. Though it felt a bit like an arbitrary interpretation. Ultimately, when it came to a knight great enough to be recognized by the dragon, the only person meeting such qualifications whom Subaru could think of was Reinhard. Taking a more broad interpretation, it was also technically true that Emilia, having cleared the trial of the first layer at the Pleiades watchtower, was also someone who fulfilled those conditions. Subaru. Though a development where a royal candidate ends up becoming another royal candidate's knight would be quite amusing with how it breaks the system, Emilia Tan has me, so that development gets rejected. Phylor, Emilia being my knight T, that is certainly an idea that tempts my heart. However, my hopes and aspirations differ from hers. Please do not lead me any further astray. Getting the feeling that he could neither say, don't be shaken over something so trivial, nor Emilia's the target of comparison, so it can't be helped that you feel shaken. Subaru ultimately said nothing to Phylor. Taking no notice of Subaru's consideration, Phylor briefly cleared her throat. Phylor. All right. Is it all right? As I have said, if I, a saintess of the Church of the Divine Dragon, am to stand as a royal candidate, then it must be that my knight is one that has been recognized by the dragon. And so, as far as I am aware, there is but one personage who meets that criteria. When such a prestigious requirement was raised to the forefront, there was just a single person who came to mind, whether one liked it or not. As irony would have it, he was an opponent who was destined to contend against Phylor, not only in the battle for the throne, but over the question of who was the true survivor of the Lugunican royal family. None other than the one and only knight in service to Felt, the sword saint Reinhard van Astria, Phylor, Heinkel Astria Sama. Subaru, NGH. Feeling as though he had heard a mixed-up reply, Subaru's throat unwittingly let out a horrendous squeal. However, Phylor wore a smug look on her face upon making her declaration. Beside her, Emilia and Beatrice were visibly as shocked as Subaru, their eyes wide open in surprise. Even if an Astria was an Astria, it was a different Astria than the one he had envisioned. Subaru. Phylor. Phylor. What is the matter? Or rather, aren't everybody's reactions somewhat strange? Subaru. Yeah, they're strange, all right. Could I please just ask you to tell us one more time? The one most fit to be the knight of a saintess of the Church of the Divine Dragon is who exactly? Phylor, like I said, I would prefer if you did not make me repeat myself however many times, but Heinkel Astria Sama. However many times he heard it, the name did not take on a different sound, and as she voiced it, Phylor inclined her head. From her perspective, it seemed like the reactions of Subaru and the rest were far more difficult to understand. That was only natural. After all, in her eyes, the person known as Heinkel Astria was Phylor, one from the lineage of sword saints who, upon conquering the dragon's blood that washed over his body, was reforged into an immortal knight, Heinkel Astria Sama. I wish to name him as my knight. Indeed, having risen to the stage as the 6th royal candidate, Phylor boasted that in her position as the 6th, the individual most fit to be her one and only knight was none other than the backstabber Heinkel Astria.